Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck and we get to explore history. History today that goes back to 1872. My, did you know Eagle Point was a going concern? Let's talk to my guest. I'd like you to meet Bob and tell me, what am I looking at here?
You are looking at a postcard of the Butte Creek Mill in Eagle Point that was built in 1872 when Ulysses S. Grant was president. And it's the last water-powered grist mill that's commercially operated this side of the Mississippi River. There used to be hundreds of them.
Well, because there was lots of grain grown, and nobody wanted to sit and use the coffee grinder but that's another way of grinding.
Oh, sure.
Well, what do you use? Let's start with what makes a
water-powered grist mill? Well,
right.
Of course you have to have water. So the mill was built on Little Butte Creek in Eagle Point. And when they built it, they had to build a log dam about a half a mile upstream and divert the water into a mill race.
And folks, that's still operating, isn't it?
That is still operating. It was hand dug 6 feet deep and 6 feet wide for a half a mile to get the water to the mill.
So it's all downhill from there.
It's all downhill from there.
And just happens that Doug and I took his sister Barbara and husband over there. There is Butte Creek.
Yep.
And underneath Butte Creek is a little underneath the mill. Mm-hmm. You've made a little trail?
Well, underneath the mill, what we've done is you can go down in the basement of the mill and see the mill race actually coming into the mill to what's called our penstock, where we get our power from a turbine that was put in there in 1872. We don't have a traditional overshot water wheel that some people expect to see with an antique flour mill.
So there are two different ways to...
You want to turn those giant stones that are 4 feet in diameter and weigh 1,400 pounds apiece. And one traditional way is an overshot wheel on the outside of a mill that the water pours over and turns the wheel. And the other way is a turbine. And our turbine was invented in 1870 by a man named James Leffel. And when the mill was built in 1872, it was absolute state-of-the-art.
A modern mill.
A modern mill.
Well, now, it really started out because of the felt need of the community?
Yes. When James Daly partnered with Mr. Emery, they decided that the Rogue Valley needed to have a mill because there were so many farmers that grew grain, and they had both had some experience on the East Coast before coming out west in milling. And so they pooled their funds together, and one of their biggest investments was to send off to Paris, France for French burr stones.
Why French burr stones? And this is one right here.
That is a sample of the mill stone, what it's made out of. French burr stones, that one quarry just outside of Paris has been used since Roman times to quarry stones for grinding grain, and they still quarry them to this day. And it's a very dense, and when
Yes.
you touch that hammer to it, you can hear how hard that rock is.
It sure is. It's not smooth like marble.
No, not at all.
Because what does that quality offer to grain wheel?
Well, that quality, the biggest quality it has is its how hard it is. It's a very hard quartz type rock. It looks very porous, but it's not. And when they are milled down into a 4 foot in diameter, 1,400 pound millstone, it's fairly smooth on the top, but it has grooves that spoke out from the middle, and that transfers the flour to the outside of the stones as the stone is turning, and it pushes the flour out so it can go on its way down in the lower level of the mill.
Well, one of the fun things was that I got to go down underneath, and you have a mill Wright? Is that
Yep.
his name?
That's Mike Hawkins.
Now, Mike has been there for a long, long time,
Over 18 years.
but you're a new kid.
I'm a new kid, less than a year.
And how did it happen that you came to Butte Creek?
It's really a funny story because I've been an avid history buff and collector of antiques since I was 9 years old, and I'm 55. And all of my spare time for all of these years has been enjoying history, historical buildings, and learning more about antiques and things. I met Peter Crandall, who owned the mill 7 years ago, because he and I collected old general store collectibles, old product containers and things like that. And I called Peter on approximately December 1st, 2004, and said, Peter, I had heard you were selling your collection. And he said, well, I've already sent it off to auction, but I just put the mill on the market last week.
Ah.
And I mentioned that to my wife, and she said, well, let's go down and take a look.
Down from where?
Portland. I'm born and raised.
City guy.
Yep. Never had any experience with the mill. Never thought about changing careers or moving.
Well, changing from what?
I was in the, of all things, office equipment building, digital copiers and printers.
Well, I'd hate to tell you, but the first thought is boring.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's numbers and catalogs and...
I had 57 neckties, and I lived in a suit and traveled around the West Coast.
You didn't wear a necktie today. What's the story?
I haven't worn one since. So when my wife and I went down there to take a look at this mill a couple of days later, we had an offer that we presented less than a week after that, and our whole life has been upside down ever since.
The suit and ties hang in a closet someplace. Or,
They're now at the Goodwill.
okay.
I saved 2 ties out of 57 and 2 suits, got rid of all the rest, and never looked back and never had, don't miss it at all.
Well, when I got to visit the mill about 2 weeks ago, I was so impressed. I could not believe all the things there that shout history, and yet as clean can be. Altogether a turn back the clock.
Yes. That's exactly the feeling we want people to have when they walk in. And one of the first things we did was we decided we really need to straighten up some of the refuse that has just accumulated over the last 134 years.
And a few weeds besides.
And a few weeds.
Now, what have you done with those weeds beside your building?
Well, after countless hours of chopping and hacking, we have taken 50 or 60 years worth of blackberries that have covered the whole back of the mill and the creek. You could not see the creek when we bought the place. After hacking all of those out, we've now landscaped down to the creek so you can enjoy the creek, and picnic tables are down there now.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned picnic tables, folks. I don't know that there's any of this that you can buy in their store that you take and make a picnic lunch out of that day. I mean, here's a
Anastasia beans.
oh, I'm so glad you could say that word. They look more like cranberry beans to me.
We sell cranberry beans as well.
I mean, they look like they've got chicken pox to me. So you don't have ready-to-eat items in there?
Well, actually, we are right now in the process. We'll be selling scones and muffins made with our mixes, along with coffee by the cup. And we have cheeses, and we have pop and things to drink, and we even have a wine section now.
Well, I'm looking at pancake and waffle mix, and this happens to be in my kitchen.
Uh-huh.
Several items of your, we've been fanciers of Butte Creek Mills. Try to say that real fast. For a number of years, and always stopped there. Well, this year when we took our visiting relatives, Barb and Jimmy from Whittier, California, I found things new and different. And what a treat. This is one of my favorites. It's your boom. You call it confetti.
Yep.
I just call it bean soup.
all the different colors of lentils. We just combined them all together, one of our own little recipes we developed at the mill, and it makes a terrific soup, and it's very pleasing to look at.
Yellow and green, split pea, even the, and I learned the word lenticular. Mm-hmm. And you already
probably learned it from Jackie, who has been in our store for quite a few years, and she's very, very good with nutrition and learning all of the finer points of some of our products.
Well, lenticular means that it's shaped like a lens, mm-hmm. and lentil beans and the flat curves and all. I got to go to a factory where they split these on the Columbia River. You know, they took regular peas and ran them through a mill, and they took the hull off, and out came the pea. Never forgot that tours that you can take your kids on will build into them, well, 50 years later, information they can do a TV show about. Mm-hmm. But why? Why these curly up old pictures that look like, well, you know, this looks like something right out of the attic. Why did you bring these?
Well, you know, it was really timely, because this morning at about 9:30, a man pulled up in a 1940 Packard.
Ooh.
And he had these photos of wheat harvesting. He had mentioned it to me about 2 weeks ago that he thought he had some and asked me if I'd be interested. And he brought them by this morning and donated them to the mill, because we're trying to tell the story of the whole process from the wheat, how it's harvested, and then it comes to the mill and how we grind it into flour. And so I thought it was quite appropriate.
Isn't this by horse-drawn?
Horse-drawn equipment.
Of course, in that day, you said
Sure.
1870?
1872. There were wagons lined up for half a mile in front of the mill with loads of wheat to be finished, to be ground into flour, and they'd start at 5 o'clock in the morning so they could go back and bring extra loads, and the mill ran almost 24 hours a day to accommodate all these farmers.
Now, if I had a little 1 acre, I could bring it to you and you'd grind it into...
We don't do that anymore.
No, I meant...
But back in those days, yes, you could. And the way the miller got paid was he got 1 out of every 7 bags. That was his payment. So that's why he needed a country store, because then he would sell his flour, and some of it he'd make feed out of. And the Indians would come in the fall and get their winter wheat, and they would trade huckleberries and leather goods and baskets. And so all of those things, it was a bartering system.
Why not?
Sure.
Now, so you know about the Indian heritage of coming to the mill?
Yeah, it was a very big part of their business for many, many years.
Well, there's so much about what you do there that fascinates me, but wheels and wheels within wheels are part of my love.
Well, you hit the jackpot then coming to the Butte Creek Mill, because there are so many wheels and gears. We found stuff tucked under eaves and throughout the basement and the second floor and the third floor. Wheels were everywhere.
Okay, what happens with this? Because this ties into the wheels,
Well,
doesn't
it does. Yeah, we have a series, if you could picture, that's just a small section out of what could be a 40 or 50 foot run. And we store wheat and we store corn up in upper bins. And when we want to transfer it, you would just pull that little piece of wood out, and the bin up above full of grain, that grain would go down into another chute, and it would probably go to one of our elevators, which is a series of little cups that go around and around that will transfer it back up or to another part of the mill. And it all works on gravity.
Now those little cups are kind of like what we'd see on a water wheel.
Only they're attached to canvas straps.
Same way they were done in 1800s?
We have barrels of the old canvas straps with the metal cups that were made by hand. We had, for our flour that we transfer now, it is now a polymer type cup that the Department of Agriculture, of course, since this is for human consumption, we had to shift over. But those same elevators you can see those at the mill. We have little glass doors in them, and you can see them going around and around doing their job, moving grain and flour.
And your millwright's name is?
Mike Hawkins.
Mike took me right in there. Well, I'll show you. He came, we went right in there, and I said, Mike, I'd really like to see what comes out. So I did that. I just reached right in this conveyor because, first of all, it's the grain.
Yes, it's big hopper, and since we store it up above, we pull a rope, and it lowers it through a tube, and we have hard red wheat, we have rye wheat, we have soft white wheat, which is used for pastry flour, and we have yellow corn, all stored up there. And depending upon what we're grinding that day, he'll pull the rope, and it'll come down the tube into that big hopper above the stones.
But how does it get up there?
They used to use wooden augers, and we have one on display on the front porch.
An auger does like this.
Just like when you're screwing into a piece of wood and that wood comes out the top. Same principle, only we now use a metal auger that we lower down through the original second floor door into the truck that has the wheat in it, and that auger can auger 4,000 pounds of grain in about 10 minutes up into our way upper bins. 4,000
pounds, you're talking a whole truckload.
Well, we will get 30,000 pounds at a time, so.
And now I haven't seen that, but next time there's a truck.
I'll give you a behind-the-scenes tour.
But it goes into this?
It goes into the upper bins, and then when it gets into that hopper right above the stones, it's when we pull that rope and lower it down in preparation for lowering it into the stones.
Well, you know what I've got to ask, do you have tours?
We have tours every single day, and if anybody calls ahead, we can make it even a more special tour.
What about for kids?
It is perfect for kids because when you think about it, how many times can you learn about nutrition? You can learn about fish and wildlife because that stream is so important for salmon. You learn about history, and you learn about the scientific principles of manufacturing with a turbine. All of those things into one, and we have had countless classrooms. We're open all the time for kids to come.
Because when you think about something so basic as rock being so incredibly important for feeding
the world.
The world, yes. Yeah. And primarily what it's meant to us here in Southern Oregon, Northern California, because they weren't going to go get a sack from the
Safeway.
From Safeway.
Yeah.
Better, you know, they had to be very innovative. You've brought this, and I gravitated, right away to that. What's the story?
That is whole yellow corn, and we sell lots of it.
Not popcorn.
Nope, it's not popcorn. We do sell the best popcorn you've ever tasted as well, but I didn't have room for everything.
But why corn?
Well, we make cornbread mix that actually tastes like corn. It has 100% of all of the germ. There's nothing taken away like when you buy a processed cornbread mix. It has been so bleached of all of the nutrients. This is just pure yellow corn, and this is the best yellow corn we can find to buy.
From where?
It's from Northern California.
Great. We know that lots of food basket, I mean, our valleys here in Southern Oregon and Northern California create so much of the felt need for food. Mm-hmm. This corn is really like Pioneer food, right?
Oh, it's as pure as, you're tasting the same taste as the Pioneers tasted.
Can't beat that. Can't beat that. We have pictures of the mill. Now this is the one, I'll show you. See how you could hardly even get down to the river here, the creek.
Right.
The creek.
Mm-hmm.
But now I walked around here and down here and got to see those wheels. Mm-hmm. They create a waterfall.
Yes.
It's as beautiful a place for a picnic. There it is.
Yeah.
What's this?
That's a little runoff just as the mill race comes into the mill. When we're not grinding, instead of having the water come through, we have it divert out back into Little Butte Creek.
So it never knows that it's gone off to help
The beauty of the mill is, if it wasn't for the mill, our water right is from 1872, and it's 24.4 cubic feet per second. In the summertime, if the mill wasn't there, the irrigators would literally dry out that creek. But we have what's called a non-consumptive right, so the water comes through and runs the equipment, but it's back in the stream, and so the fish have passage all throughout the summer, and there are more salmon that come out of Little Butte Creek that feeds the Rogue River than any other tributary to the Rogue. So it's real important that the mill is there for the salmon's habitat, and we even have our own fish ladder a half a mile up that you can watch the salmon go up every fall.
Oh, I want to come back.
You've got to. It's really fun.
Now, you said non-consumptive?
Non-consumptive in that...
New word for me, folks.
Sure. Well, it's... an irrigator will consume that water and put it out in the field, and it's gone. Okay. We just run it through the mill, it turns our turbine, and it's back in stream, and nobody knows the difference. I mean, it's all that water is still there.
And there's some kind of a fish safety place that the fish go around the other edge?
Well, in the olden days, the miller used to catch Chinook salmon with a pitchfork inside the mill in the mill race.
No.
All the time. And I can show you where that is. But now, and back in the early 80s, the Department of Fish and Wildlife put in a fish screen about halfway down our mill race, and it diverts any wayward salmon off back into Little Butte Creek.
I've heard of shooting
fish in a barrel?
In a barrel. It sounds a little that way, but what a way to get lunch.
Oh, yeah.
What a way to get lunch. Now, back to the kids.
Sure.
What can they see? What can they learn about history? That's really my thing, is history of Southern Oregon, Northern California.
Well, the first thing they're going to see when they walk into the mill is that it's essentially like it was in 1872. We have 2-foot in diameter hand-hewn beams that still have all the axe marks on them. And they can learn a little bit about how post and beam construction works, because you can see all these giant beams that were hewn and then put into place with wooden pegs, and you can still see the wooden pegs.
What's over the top of your door even before you go in?
Well, we have an old auger up above that we've put up there so people can see what an auger looks like. And that's right above where we use our modern auger to auger grain up into the upper areas. Then they can see our collection of photographs of the mill and of Eagle Point. And then we're happy to take them into the milling room, and they can actually see the stone turning and grinding those grains into flour.
Now, some mills would have a horse or mule that would go round and round and drive it.
Yes.
They'd have to feed that horse grain.
Sure.
You don't have to feed your creek anything.
Not a thing.
It's there.
It's a wonderful green power source.
And just a natural. What's the history of grinding grain? What do we know about it?
Well, even in the Rogue Valley and even near the mill, people have found basalt stones that the Native Americans ground their corn with. And they were doing that hundreds of years before the white man ever came to North America. Mexico is where corn was really developed, and they did a lot of grinding with stones. And that was how it started.
And what about European grinding?
Europeans ground with stones, but they used a lot of wind power. The windmills that you see, many of those were to grind, to have the stone go around and grind grain.
And animals sometimes were used to power. You've brought so many things. I'm just going to have to invite you back. That's all there is to it. But let's talk family. You are a family man.
Yes, I am.
There they are. What you got? 3
nice young children. I have a daughter, Kristen, who's the oldest. She lives in Portland. Daughter Erica, who is 25. She lives in Portland and just had our first grandchild.
Speaking of grandchildren,
isn't he
Grandpa
cute?
got this out of his wallet.
Yeah, he's almost 3 months old now.
Name of?
Nicholas.
Great.
And then
Now-
I have a son who's 22, and he is my right-hand man at the mill. He's living with us in Eagle Point.
And learning the mills.
More or less. You know, he's a city boy who's come down here to this strange area called Eagle Point, and he's getting used to it, and he's a big help.
Eagle Point's history is farm and early pioneers.
Yes.
Then it was Camp White, right? Military came in and said,
Yeah.
we need a camp in Southern Oregon.
And that's just south of Eagle Point and White City, basically. But that had a big influence on the area, for sure.
Sure, they've saved a corner, the military saved a corner of Eagle Point, and that's where we recently went to military burial, and they
The National Cemetery?
complete with the trumpets and the whole thing and the cannons and the,
It's a beautiful place.
One more thing, in this picture there is a big hound dog.
Oh, that's Shelby the Wonder Dog, our Australian Shepherd.
Wow. And your wife?
My wife, Debbie, is working hard at the mill today.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to get her away.
No.
She was there taking my money last time I went and offering me some advice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you know, it's just great to be able to ask questions. Now, how long will it take to cook these whole oats, or how long, what should I do with some of the items, grits? I notice you have grits.
Yes.
Is
We
there
have
a
a lot of
little-
unusual things.
A little Southern in you?
Oh, not me, but you know, when we purchased the store from the Crandalls, they had developed a loyal clientele that had special requests, and we have people come from all over that want the special things we grind and make.
Well, I happen to see the list here of people you ship to all over,
All over the country, all
But-
over the world, really.
but it's also available in my store right next to the TV station here. Oh, Butte Creek. I'm going to ask you more about this, but we don't have time right now. There's the way it's made. And there's where it ends up in the store.
Yep.
Thank you so much for
You're very
being my
welcome.
guest,
Thanks for
Bob.
having me.
We'll just talk more and more about Eagle Point, and well, this is where you sell it in Klamath, in Grants Pass, in Shady Cove, and a lot of our local places, but we're here to talk history. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying bye for now.